Priya Singh was only 22 when her bright future in Texas was stolen, not by a stranger in the night, but by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Her father, her brother, and her silent mother would become the central figures in one of the most shocking honor killings ever uncovered in America. What began as the secret love story of a young Indian daughter ended in betrayal, brutality, and a shallow grave that stunned an entire community. The Singh family lived in a neat brick house on a quiet street in suburban Dallas, Texas. To outsiders, they looked like a picture of stability and discipline, the kind of family that worked hard to build a better life in America. Neighbors admired their strong work ethic. The small grocery store they ran was open long hours, and the family rarely complained about the sacrifices it demanded. People often saw the father driving back and forth to the store, while the mother managed the household with careful precision. Their children, Priya and her younger brother, were polite, well-dressed, and always respectful to elders. To the community, the Singhs represented everything good about the immigrant dream. But beneath this polished surface, there were unspoken rules that shaped daily life. Priya, at 22, was at an age where most young women were carving out independent futures. She attended college, volunteered at a local clinic, and quietly planned for a career in nursing. To her parents, however, she was still a daughter bound by traditions that left little room for personal choices. They were proud of her achievements, but strict in their expectations. There were curfews, restrictions on her social life, and constant reminders of the values she was expected to uphold. Priya kept her thoughts to herself, hiding her desire for freedom. She smiled at neighbors, excelled in class, and fulfilled her family duties, all while quietly imagining a life of her own. For those around her, she seemed content, but her silence was often misunderstood. The truth was that she was walking a delicate line, trying to respect her family's honor while craving a future on her own terms. It was a fragile balance that could not last forever. It was during her second year of college that Priya's carefully controlled life began to shift. She met Michael in a biology lab, an outgoing student who carried an easy confidence that contrasted with her quiet reserve. At first, their connection was simple and innocent, studying together, sharing notes, laughing between classes. Michael didn't know much about her strict upbringing, only that she seemed cautious, as if she were constantly looking over her shoulder. Over time, their meetings stretched beyond campus. Coffee shops, study sessions at the library, and short walks after class became small escapes for Priya. The friendship soon grew into something deeper. Michael treated her as an equal, asking about her dreams and listening without judgment. For Priya, who lived under constant expectations, his openness felt like freedom. She found herself drawn to the way he encouraged her ambitions instead of restricting them. Their bond strengthened, and before long, it blossomed into a secret relationship. To Priya, Michael wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a glimpse of the life she wished she could live openly. But with each passing week, hiding became more difficult. She deleted messages, invented excuses for her late returns, and carefully managed her social media presence. Her parents, who had strict rules about her future marriage, expected her to one day wed an Indian man chosen from their community. The thought of introducing Michael to them filled her with dread. Despite the risks, Priya clung to the relationship, convinced that love was worth the secrecy. Every stolen moment with Michael carried both joy and danger. She was walking deeper into a world that could never align with the one her parents demanded. It was only a matter of time before the walls of her double life began to close in. It was Priya's younger brother who first sensed that something was out of place. He noticed her slipping out more often, her phone always within reach, and the way she guarded her privacy with unusual intensity. To him, these were not just harmless habits, but warning signs. His suspicions grew stronger when he saw her smiling at her phone late at night, a side of his sister he had never witnessed before. Curiosity turned into vigilance, and soon he was watching her closely. One evening, while she was in the shower, he picked up her phone and scrolled through her messages. What he found was undeniable: photos of Priya with Michael, their arms around each other, their smiles radiant. To the brother, it felt like betrayal, not just of the family, but of everything they had been taught to protect. Without hesitation, he took the evidence to his parents. The reaction inside the Singh household was explosive. What began as disbelief quickly spiraled into anger. To her father, Priya's actions were not a simple mistake, but a wound to the family's honor. Her mother was torn between fear and silence, caught in the storm of rage that filled the room. The idea that their daughter had chosen a relationship outside their culture felt like humiliation too heavy to bear. In their minds, it was not just about love. It was about reputation, community judgment, and the traditions they held sacred. The brothers' discovery had ripped away the family's carefully maintained facade. Priya was no longer seen as a daughter who needed guidance, but as someone who had broken the unspoken contract of obedience. In that moment, a line was crossed. What could have been a conversation about love and independence transformed into something darker, a decision that would seal her fate. On the night Priya disappeared, the world outside her family home carried on as usual, but inside, tension hung heavy. She had told her parents she was going to meet a study group, a familiar excuse she had used many times before. In reality, she was planning to see Michael, desperate for a brief escape from the suffocating atmosphere that had followed the discovery of her secret. She left the house quietly, unaware that this time her absence would trigger something irreversible. When Priya didn't return by morning, her neighbors assumed little was wrong. College students often stayed out late, and she had always been responsible. But Michael grew anxious quickly. She had promised to call after their meeting, yet the night passed in silence. By the following afternoon, his concern turned to fear, and he reported her missing to the police. Officers began piecing together her movements, interviewing classmates, co-workers, and finally her family. The Singh family's answers were unnervingly flat. They claimed they didn't know where she had gone, and they showed no visible panic. For investigators accustomed to desperate parents pleading for their child's return, the family's composure was unsettling. Behind closed doors, detectives whispered suspicions that Priya's relatives were hiding something. As the search stretched into days, Michael's grief deepened. He cooperated fully with police, providing text messages, call logs, and details of their relationship. For the first time, authorities understood the extent of Priya's secret life, a life she had fought to protect from her family. Still, no trace of her was found. Posters with her photo appeared across the neighborhood. Candlelight vigils were organized, and yet the silence from her own family grew louder. To investigators, it felt less like ignorance and more like knowledge cloaked in denial. 2 weeks after Priya's disappearance, hope for her safe return was fading. The breakthrough came in the most unsettling way. A farmer working on the edge of his property noticed disturbed soil near a grove of trees. At first, he assumed it was the work of wild animals, but as he dug deeper, he uncovered something horrifying: the remains of a young woman hastily buried in a shallow grave. Authorities were immediately called, and within hours the site was swarming with investigators. Dental records confirmed what many feared: the body belonged to Priya Singh. The autopsy painted a grim picture. She had been strangled, her body marked with multiple stab wounds, suggesting rage rather than a random attack. The brutality ruled out the possibility of an accident or a crime of passion committed by a stranger. Detectives now turned their full attention to the people closest to her. Suspicion had already lingered on the family, and the discovery of the body gave police the leverage they needed to dig deeper. Phone records revealed Priya's father's number pinging near the farmland on the very night she disappeared. Further analysis showed her brother's car had mud consistent with the soil from the burial site. The coincidences became too overwhelming to ignore. When investigators questioned the family again, cracks in their story began to show. Timelines didn't match, explanations shifted, and the once calm facade began to erode under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Michael was devastated by the news, his grief only intensifying as he learned how deliberately Priya's life had been taken. The community, too, was shaken. What had once seemed like a missing persons case was now confirmed as a calculated and violent killing. Slowly, the truth of an honor-driven murder began to surface, casting the Singh family in a sinister new light. The trial that followed was one of the most chilling the community had ever witnessed. Prosecutors presented a case built on cold evidence: phone records, soil samples, and testimony from investigators who described the family's unusual behavior during the search. The courtroom listened in silence as the timeline of Priya's last night was reconstructed piece by piece. It became clear that her death had not been spontaneous but carefully planned. The father had driven to the rural site days before, scouting it out, while the brother was tasked with transporting her on the night she vanished. The brutality of the attack revealed deep anger masked as duty, an act carried out in the name of protecting family reputation. Priya's mother remained a haunting figure throughout the proceedings. She never raised her voice, never defended her daughter, and never condemned the crime. Prosecutors accused her of knowing everything and doing nothing, of choosing silence over protection. To many in the courtroom, her stillness was almost as disturbing as the violence itself. The verdict brought both relief and sorrow. The father and brother were convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The mother was charged as an accessory and, after serving a reduced sentence, was deported back to India. Justice had been delivered in the legal sense, but it did little to ease the grief of those who had loved Priya. Friends and classmates remembered her not as the victim of a horrific crime, but as a young woman with ambition and kindness who had wanted nothing more than to live freely. Her story left the community shaken, a reminder of how traditions can be twisted into chains and how silence can be as deadly as violence itself. In the end, the echoes of her tragedy refused to fade.